Joe Rogan, who Clay and I both agree, now we really got to have him on, Clay.
No doubt.
Now this absolutely. Now, Joe Rogan, we're putting out the bat symbol, but it's the Joe symbol, or I guess the Rogan symbol, because we don't want people to think it's Biden. You got to come on and talk to us about this. He came down with COVID, which I've had and Clay has had, and I'm sure a lot of you have had. But the media is using this as an opportunity to push the whole Fauciite narrative into overdrive, and there's a lot of hysteria, exaggeration, dishonesty around this. And we want to break down what's real, what's not, what you should know, and what is just flatly untrue. But let's just get to here's very famous podcaster. I mean, I think he's probably the biggest podcast by listens in the United States right now, which I suppose means the world. Here he is saying, yeah, he got COVID.
Turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything. And I also got an NAD drip and a vitamin drip, and I did that 3 days in a row. And so here we are on Wednesday, and I feel great.
Clay, everything that he has said there, you could say is entirely within the protocol of normal and defensible. Plenty of people. The point, though, that the media is freaking out about is specifically ivermectin, which I took when I had COVID, not because I thought it was some miracle cure, but because a doc that I was working said, look, it's very safe and it may help. Clay, they're acting like ivermectin is some crazy horse dewormer that no one should ever take for any reason. It's reckless.
That's what all of the headlines, in fact, are saying, Buck. And look, when I had COVID, I had a very mild case. I didn't take anything. One day, I had a 99-degree fever. It was a Sunday. I kicked up and watched even more NFL football than I ordinarily would. The next day, I didn't have a fever anymore. I have all the home studios, so I was able to continue to work. I didn't miss a day of work. But I didn't need to have any treatment other than what I would normally do if I got a virus, 24-hour virus. Didn't feel great, but didn't feel awful for one day. Buck, the headlines for Joe Rogan, they are treating this like he is a madman for what he is giving himself. And also, and this is what I think is the biggest story, because we're also going to talk about Candace Owens, who we've had on the show. She wanted to get a COVID test in Aspen. We'll get to that in a moment. But the underlying story here, and we didn't talk about him, but it was a big story in conservative talk radio on certain level. Phil Valentine, who does a show in the Nashville area, got COVID and ended up dying of it. The amount of people out there who think of themselves as empathetic, think of themselves as the elite of the American media, who react with glee anytime somebody gets COVID. I mean, there are a lot of people out there, Puck, that would be very happy if Joe Rogan got COVID, one, and two, they want him to get deathly ill and or even die because they don't think he's been sufficiently alarmist as it pertains to COVID.
Well, we haven't even addressed yet what his original sin was in the eyes of the media, which is that he said young, healthy,
yes,
low-risk people shouldn't be forced to get the vaccine,
correct,
which is true, but also enrages the Fauciite fascists.
That's right.
So much so. I mean, this is just one example of it, Clay. MSNBC, which we know lunatic stuff over there all the time. Hard to parody MSNBC. Headline here, podcast host Joe Rogan says he has COVID-19 and used ivermectin, a drug typically used on livestock that health experts have urged the public to avoid. Let's just dig into that for 1 second.
That's the headline.
Ivermectin, that was the word-for-word headline. Ivermectin is a drug that is on a par with things like penicillin, with anti-malarial drugs, has saved millions of lives, likely, over the last 50 years. It is an anti-parasitic medication that the discoverer of got the Nobel Science Prize, not Peace Prize,
yes,
Nobel Science Prize for. That's how much of a monumental discovery. But they're telling people, the experts say, avoid it. No, that's actually, there's a lot of very good reasons to take ivermectin, and it's an incredibly safe drug. So if people wanted to, just, Clay, take a shot with it. The chance of it having any ill effect is very, very, very small. And maybe because of in vitro testing, it might be helpful against the virus's replication at some level. That's the theory. They're talking about it like it's some crazy horse drug that only maniacs take.
Yeah, and they're talking about it like he's got a syringe that he went into a horse stall, right, and took. And it was like, oh, we were going to inject Secretariat with this ivermectin. Instead, Joe Rogan went and grabbed it, and he injected it himself. This goes to the essence of the way that experts are treated, and I'm putting experts in quotation marks here, because I don't know that there's ever been a time where you can read more headlines, Buck, and you and I'll text them back and forth, and legitimately roll your eyes that anyone could have ever written a headline for an article like this. Because what it's about attempting to do is make you and me and other people who I think are actually in the mainstream, right? We have a lot more in common with most people in America right now as we are dealing with COVID than the people out there who are going to mask for the rest of their lives, the people who are terrified that they're going to die. And what's going to really make them upset is Joe Rogan is back to normal already. He's fine, like almost everybody who gets COVID and is otherwise healthy will be. Are there exceptions? Yes, but the vast majority of healthy people are fine if they get COVID.
But there's also a recklessness in the way they'll talk about Joe Rogan's protocol. They did the same thing when they were coming down on Ron DeSantis in Florida. They act like monoclonal antibodies or something. Oh, why are you pushing those? Because it works really well. Because it actually helps people get better a lot faster. And you will not even get the little fascist lab coat tyrant Fauci to go on TV and say otherwise, but they always downplay the monoclonal antibodies because, Clay, you take that, what do you get? Natural immunity. And if you believe that you're at low risk and you could get monoclonal antibodies, maybe your risk parameters for whether you want to get the vaccine or not change. And we know this is the one-size-fits-all. You must get the shot forever, by the way, continuously, or else everything else falls by the wayside.
And this is just a fundamental level of dishonesty. You're talking Joe Rogan's getting attacked like crazy, which honestly I think is going to work in favor of people like you and me because Joe Rogan's got a big audience. We've got a big audience. Every time we get attacked unfairly, our audience grows. It's great advertising, right? Because people are like, some people don't know we exist. Some people don't know Joe Rogan exists. There are people listening to us right now that would have had no idea Joe Rogan existed. We played that clip and they think, you know, that's a reasonable response to an adult getting COVID. I'm going to go check out some of the other things that guy's saying. And ultimately, this is how we win, Buck. And I know we have this discussion a lot, and there's different ideas of how you win. But we live in a country where 40% of people are going to believe that white supremacy is the biggest threat to American life in America today. They're just going to believe it. It's hard to persuade those 40% they're wrong. 40% are going to be smart, in my opinion, and agree with a lot of what we say. We got to win the other 20. And this, to me, is how we win the other 20 and start to kick ass.
Well, it's essential, and I completely agree with you, and it's essential to continue to show everybody that the so-called consensus on COVID from the apparatus of the Democrat corporate media, the Democrat Party, the CDC, the federal bureaucracy, they say things that are wrong and do not own up to it. They mislead people constantly and never admit it. These are areas, when you see people who are lying to you, take note of it. When you see people who do not admit mistakes, that's important. That's a data point all on its own. They've been completely unwilling to do that. And the crazy and hysterical attacks on Rogan show you how important narrative is over. Instead of saying Joe Rogan's sick, hey, everybody, notice how he's taking monoclonal antibodies. That's really effective and could probably save the lives of a lot of people hearing this if they get that early treatment, which is also why Ron DeSantis wants people in Florida to know about it. Everybody knows about the vaccine. Not everybody knows monoclonal antibodies. No, Clay, they push the narrative and the mindset, which I know you want to talk to us about here in a second, manifests itself not only in do this or else, but now it's turning into do what we say or we won't treat you.
Yes.
You don't get medical assistance, Candace
Which
Owens.
is a fantastic tease, and that is what we are going to talk about in the next segment, because ultimately this is about taking away your freedom and trying to punish you for whatever you are doing that goes against the mainstream. And that's probably the wrong word, but the elite left-wing idea.